try to do starting on time. Our session is about the onboarding plan, and thank you for joining a not so technical session. Why we want to talk about onboarding? Well, during the last 2 or 3 CLA summits, I think, we were involved in a lot of discussion around onboarding, bringing new people up to speed, stuff like that. And a lot of people were coming up with really, really good ideas, techniques, best practices, but nobody starts to collect them. So we said, why? Let's take on that task and collect all of that. We are by far not through all of that, so I'm already sorry for if there's something not totally complete. And we are not earning money for doing something like that. So we are not in a consulting company. It's not our job to make recommendations for onboarding. So it's really a free time project that we are doing by side. So if there's something not 100% scientific correct, please again, also sorry for that. So why should you hear us talking about the topic of onboarding? Well, at least for me, I have a job, and I hope every one of you as well. So every one of us has at least some experience with onboarding, right? So that's my background, and I heard a lot of people. But you should really hear what Wolfgang is saying. I have 3 proof points why he's really an expert in onboarding.
Not being read.
The first proof point is he and his team earned this week 2 awards, one for the best user group, and the other one was for Center of Excellence. So that's the first proof point. The second proof point is he onboarded 2 students. They are here in the room.
Yeah. Gerard, Michael.
Hands up. There is he sitting. And he onboarded them so well that they are presenters at NIWeek. That's awesome, right? And the third thing, these 2 guys recognized something on that slide. Did you recognize something there?
Can you find the most obvious mistake in this block diagram? I was not able to find it.
We give you a hint. That's not working, right? Here's a connection missing, and that was brought up, I think, through a lot of best practices, through code review and stuff like that. After we found that, there's other stuff that is really interesting. So here there was someone really lazy and doesn't create a nice icon. There are other things as well, so there's a lot of stuff on there. So maybe I did a bad job here in onboarding. No, we will come later on that.
And so I just want to say that not I discovered it, it was were the 2, Gerard and Michael, who discovered this mistake on the NIWeek header slide. So.
But that proves that we should really hear what you are saying about onboarding. So with that, just jump right into it.
Okay, yeah, so hello also from my side. My name is Wolfgang Rominger. I'm with NXP in Austria, and when I'm mentioning something about NXP, I'm specifically talking more about the team in Austria than about whole NXP, so different principles apply to different branches and different sites. I'm a validation lead engineer since 2013, with some certifications with respect to LabVIEW testing. And also have the great opportunity and honor and pleasure also to sometimes have internship students like the 2 that are sitting also here in this session, and to implement some very nice and useful projects for us and mentor them. So that's a little bit my background.
So the first question we got always during our experience, we did a lot of interviews with different people of you, was what is onboarding?
Right, and it was kind of a literature review we did, so we divided this session into 2 parts. The first one will be more on the theoretical side, where we did some research and some background preparation. And the second part is more on best practices that we gained from those interviews we did with several people up front. And so one definition started with that onboarding in the past was seen as kind of organizational socialization. And over time that definition evolved to orienting new employees until it ended up in talent finding, and the most common quoted definition of onboarding is from Freire 2007, where they see that onboarding is a holistic approach combining people, processes, and technologies to optimize the impact of a new hire has on the organization, with an emphasis on both effectiveness and efficiency. And that shows that onboarding is much more complex than just giving a new employee a laptop and a task and let him do the work. And so with that said, I think we're going to move on to the next slide.
So the whole onboarding thing is a long process, can take over a lot of different buckets, but we want to somehow define the scope of that presentation. So if we think of a life cycle of an employee, it starts somehow with open a position. Afterwards, you have the kind of recruiting, hiring process. After that, you have then the real onboarding, so bringing the new employee up to speed so that he can contribute efficiently to your team. After that, of course, over time, the employee will hopefully develop more working on his experience. And sadly, but happens at the end, you have some kind of offboarding termination. And the whole thing is normally, if you not have budget cuts, something like a cycle that begins then back again. And we today want to focus right just on the onboarding. There will be some best practices at the end that have a bit of an overlap into the region of working people development. And of course, we have also kind of an overlap into the recruiting and hiring part. Our agenda, as said, is that we want to start with a problem statement. That's always good, because then the people will understand why it's so important. Then we will move on in some kind of the theoretical part, and after that we will jump right into best practices. And at the end we will hopefully get a lot of feedback right at the end of our presentation, but also hopefully afterwards. And during the whole presentation, we also try to have on that topic the kind of manager view and the employee view. And we did it very black and white, because at the end, please remember, every manager is also an employee. So.
Yeah, and Lorenz will play the manager and I will play the employee.
Sorry, I don't have a button-up shirt with me, but I hope I will play the role very good. So why is onboarding important? The great thing is, or the bad thing is, depending how you see it. I heard a really bad example a few months ago from one of my colleagues. Her husband was hired after he did his PhD. He did his PhD, he's technically very advanced, he's also on a social guy, someone you want to have in your team. He was hired by a very famous German company. It's not an automotive company. And this company hired him. He went there for his first day, go to HR, go through the whole process, and then HR brought him to his future team lead. This team lead was not aware that he will come. Well, that's sad. But even worse, he didn't have a laptop prepared, and it took him 2 weeks to get a laptop. What can you do without a laptop? But even worse, it took 2 weeks until he get access to email and internal tools. What you can do without access to internal emails, tools, stuff like that. So what happens with the employee at the end?
Yeah, he got frustrated, felt useless. I felt not welcome. And yeah, in the end, he left the company after a few weeks. And just to add on that, has anyone kind of similar experience?
Hopefully not so worse.
Yeah, that's maybe an extreme, but
yeah. So that's the kind of an employee view. We also tried to get manager view on the thing, and I did a lot of research before the presentation to figure out or get a feeling to how much does hiring costs. And I found a lot of interesting articles about that, but these three were very logically, they explain very detailed how they calculate the numbers, and that makes a lot of sense to me. So in the first two ones, they stated out something, yeah, roughly around $20,000 to $25,000 are the hiring process. But very interesting, in the third article, they calculate also the productivity loss you gain if someone left your team. And that added, again, in that calculation, something like $30,000 onto the existing hiring costs. And so you see that's a huge investment. And of course, management want to secure, to save the investment in this hiring, in that recruitment process. Now that are two examples why it's very important to have a proper onboarding plan to make that thing work. But on the other hand, we want to give you a proof point that if you have a proper onboarding plan, then you get good results. And Wolfgang, you find a good example for
that?
Yeah,
it's a very interesting one. It's, I think, a local one from Texas Instruments. Although the research revealed that it has been done already quite some time ago. Almost 20 years, which shows how important it was for Texas Instruments already back then, that they could, by a strong onboarding program, get new employees to productivity 2 months earlier, than colleagues who didn't undergo that structured onboarding plan, which is, with respect to the numbers Lorenz showed before, quite an incredible achievement and a proof point that it makes sense to think of onboarding strategies.
If you're interested in any detail on that different articles, topics like that, we make always a number up there, and at the end we have a source list where you can, if you want to afterwards, read through all of the different articles and stuff like that. So in general, you can say, or divide it in 2 different directions. So management is always interested in save this huge investment in the onboarding process, in the hiring process. They want to avoid, of course, the loss of effectivity, and of course they want to save investment by avoiding failures at the end through a good onboarding process.
And as an employee, basically, it's more about feelings most of the time, I think, to feel valued, to feel welcome, to know what you contribute to the team, so what you add, what's your value, what are your responsibilities, and that you get recognized. And those kind of bullets are, according to some psychological research, which consists of 4 pillars with self-efficacy, connection, culture, knowing the company culture, and I always forget the 4th one.
The connection. The
connection.
Yes.
So those things are important in terms of guarantee successful onboarding. And with that said, we're coming to the 4 C's terminology. Before that, right, thanks. Forgot about this one. It's an obvious one, I guess. You can have either more informal onboarding, like think and swim, and you can have more the formal onboarding, where you have everything structured, written down, applicable to everyone, measurable and traceable. And this, of course, depends, I think, also on the company and on the company size and the team size, where you're doing the onboarding. Because for a small company, it might be a kind of balance between the informal sink and swim, and see if the person can really swim when you throw it into the deep water. And it needs also to fit to the person's needs, or if you have more that structured way that fits more for larger companies, that you don't have to always start and rethink at the beginning of every new hire how to do it.
And you should know that what is the process for your company, because you should really know that in the hiring process. Because there are people who are used to sink and swim. That's me. I love to get thrown onto new projects where people never had the experience before, and you can't do onboarding for that because there is no knowledge. So you should really think of that already in the definition of the position in the hiring phase, which kind of process you have. But I said there is not a bad or a good thing here. It's just shown that bigger company where you have more processes, more regulations, tend to have a more formal onboarding, and they are more successful if they have a formal onboarding, as there are so many processes.
Just maybe for my personal interest, who in the audience has a more formalized onboarding? And who is more sink or swim? And the others somewhere in the middle, or not doing an onboarding at all?
So maybe hopefully we will change that at the end. So if you start then to think of a more formalized onboarding, you should consider 4 different building blocks for your onboarding phase. Normally we are talking of 3 C's, but there are 4 C's. The first one is compliance. Compliance is all about the legal stuff, the regulations, the laws that are for your company, for your position. The second one is a clarification, so that you as an employee understand your role. The third one is the culture of your company, the values of your company. And the fourth one is the connection. What is very interesting for the onboarding process, different people tend to be responsible for these different areas. So normally the compliant thing is totally handled by HR. So we will focus on the other 3 ones. Clarification is normally team lead or the mentor, if you have something like that. But then it's getting really unclear. Who is responsible to teach the culture? Who's responsible to help the new employee get connected to his colleagues, to other colleagues in the company? And I like the quote from Microsoft as is saying, onboarding is really everyone's job, not just HR. So everyone should welcome the new employee, build him into processes, into activities and stuff like that. So let's have a more detailed view on the 3 C's, and let's start with clarification. Why is clarification important for the new employee?
So clarification, I believe for me is important because I need to know what I have to do, basically, and I need to have clarity about my tasks. So we had that session earlier on managing projects, right? Where Ryan said for him a project is done when it is implemented, functional and tested. That is kind of a thing you need to be clear about to your employee, what you expect from him. And for me, basically, as an employee in this role. And how, I also need to know how can I contribute to that success? What do I need to do? What is expected from me?
And I found a very interesting article for the management side. There was a research in UK and the US where they looked onto how many loss they gain to misunderstanding. And it is 37 billion a year. I'm not sure if that number is true, but you can read through the article, and it's very, it shows how important this is that employees know what are their tasks, what they should do. But in the end, if you do everything right, I think,
I would feel motivated, of course, and I know my duties, so I know what I can do, and would love to be part and contribute in the community and society of the company.
The next part is the culture. So the company values, company plan maybe, the language that you are speaking in your company.
That's kind of also of a little bit of vague and personal thing, but I need to agree with the company's values, so that I think is important. So I need to agree with what the company is doing. I, of course, need to know how I can contribute. I need to trust in that I will be for long-term part of that company, that the company will exist for longer than just half a year once I got hired, that I'm secured in my position so that I will not be threatened to get fired immediately after I was hired. And the last one is I know how the company ticks, this kind of understanding the culture, the operations, all the wording that is inside the company different from another company, because I guess we all know that also within NXP when you get onboarded there is a lot of new abbreviations and things you need to learn to get used to that language that we speak basically.
And we could spend a whole session just about the company culture, but there was a really good one already presented, and the presenter is sitting here in the front. So that was at the CLA East Summit, so the summit in Europe, where Darren presented a session on company structure, what that has to do with your job, and he mentioned a lot of things also on the cultural thing. So I highly recommend it to check out the session. It's available on the Architects Forum. I heard there's a recording as well.
Yeah, there was there was an issue with all the recordings in the parallel track, but they're still working on getting it.
Okay. So
something happened between the audio and the video, but there was two videos, so they're trying to take the audio from one and put it onto the other
nice.
video. But,
so thanks for the comment. So currently the recording is not available. They still have some video production issue. I don't know if you are familiar with video production. I will mention that later as well. So that's sometimes a hard thing. But they want to fix that, and the recording should be available hopefully soon. I just can recommend it because it covers all that kind of cultural thing, company structure thing. So that's a really good session to look if you're interested in that topic. So the last one is a more kind of blurry topic about the connections in the company, but it's really important for the employee, right?
Yeah, so it's something that evolves also over time, so that I feel welcome. I know the new teammates, my colleagues. It's a fun place to work together with them. That's important, and trust. But that's something that evolves over time, and that you get introduced from someone to your peers and get to know each other. And that's kind of the connection thing. So that's where onboarding is more a long-term view than a very short-term view, I think.
And connection is sometimes a bit like the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg. You have some kind of formal connection to your manager, between different groups, but there's a lot of things happen at the coffee machine that are more kind of informal and are under the water. So connection is really a hard topic to teach and to implement. So that's something we should really care of if we hire or onboard a new employee.
And one thing what comes to my mind if I think of that again is that I've read some time ago that there's also a nice way to get connected to your colleagues if you're there 5 minutes up front, the meeting, to spend some time for small talk. I guess maybe that's kind of known also in this room, but that helps to relate and build up trust with your colleagues that you don't know before the meeting. So that's kind of one way to take that responsibility on your own as an employee.
So you can imagine there are companies on different levels, have different implementation, different formalized implementation of that, different building blocks, and there we talk about different strategy levels. They call it just passive onboarding, high potential and proactive onboarding, and you can imagine then in the company plan, depending where you are, you have implemented an onboarding plan with formalized things around, depending where you are on all that kind of areas. In our interviews and speeches with different companies, we mainly talk with companies and peers in the area of high potential and proactive onboarding. So most of the people have compliance clear, have some information around clarification, but then if it's going in the direction of culture and connection, it's getting blurry. One famous company was IBM, was stuck in the high potential phase. And their goal, because they hired a lot of people at that time, was to come into the proactive phase. And they do that by implementing a new process. They called it the IBM's assimilation process. And that was not about the book. It was about these kind of process we see in here. So they defined 3 phases. Affirming, that's before the new employee is entering the team. And there you have best practice like preparing the workstation up front, defining or assigning a coach up front. Then you have a phase that they call beginning. It's until the 30th day of the employee. There you have a lot of things like meeting people in person, introduction to the team, stuff like that. And at the end you have a phase until the first year is over that they call connection. And there's a lot about networking, understanding the IBM way. And you really can find in that plan all the 4 C's that we saw before, so all the 4 building blocks. So you see here the culture, understanding the IBM way. You see here clarification of roles and responsibilities. You see networking, meeting people in person. You have up front all the compliance stuff. So all of that is visible in their plan. And there are already a lot of best practices. And with that, we want to jump into sharing all the best practices and considerations we got through our interviews with you, through the talks with you. And so let's jump right into creating our onboarding plan.
Yeah, and so that is one good starting point. I have to admit that we are not talking here about the general onboarding plan you get from HR, maybe for some compliance stuff. This is more related to onboarding new people to your team to achieve at certain milestones, certain steps that gives you kind of a, as an employee, a clarity what are the next steps, and have that in a written form. We know that this is not perfect. This was a starting point where we think that can help. We also have not yet, we don't have that yet in also our team, so this is also kind of something we love to do and have for the next evolution of new hires. But this is a great thing to see the progress and to track the progress as well. So as an employee, I know exactly, I'm crystal clear about what are my next tasks, what are the expectations within the first week, the first 30 days, the first, how long you want to extend the period for onboarding. As well as I feel motivated because I don't know yet how much I can contribute, but I have kind of a progress list and see as I tick off tasks on this onboarding plan that I have achieved, accomplished certain things. So that kind of can motivate me, that I see that success. And it's of course transparent to measure my progress.
And finally, if I'm in the team lead management role, I don't forget anything, because we tend to do that. We have a very motivated employee, and we have a good structure that makes the whole process very quick. You can just create such an onboarding plan if you have some kind of development plan overall in mind. So we call that a learning and development plan. It's also part of the LabVIEW Center of Excellence. In that learning and development plan, you define roles within your teams. That can be like, I have in my team a test engineer, a software engineer, maintenance engineer, whatever. You define the skills for that different roles, and we just grabbed the test engineer and gave you some examples. So he should have some kind of basic LabVIEW knowledge. He should be in measurement experts, PCB designer, whatever. And then you need a development plan. And that development plan not just means different training, certifications and stuff like that. It's also very good to have some kind of leveling, so that you have junior engineers and maybe senior engineers, principal engineers, so that you have really a way that you can move on the long term.
I just wanted to add something there. I think we got one from our interview with Rob, kind of a very good idea how that could work as an add-on to daily project work, because I think every new colleague who is working on a project also gets kind of a side project to develop his skills further, where he has more time to accomplish that, and that's then something that is an innovation project that is valuable to the whole team. So that's kind of also a part of how you can develop, integrate that in a development plan.
So with that learning and development plan in mind, you can start to fill now in the different parts of your onboarding plan. But there is not the perfect onboarding plan, because I mean every company is different. You have different company structures, you have maybe team leads with a different style of management, different knowledge style, and also all the situations of the team are different. So really keep that in mind. We will move you now through a lot of best practices we collect through our interviews, through our discussions, and you should take the best practice that makes sense for you and add them to your onboarding plan as one pillar, add the measurement size for that, and then work through the plan.
It's like in a supermarket, so you don't need to buy everything you see.
Yes.
Just that what fits for you the best. And one thing that we utilize a lot is making use of existing infrastructure with respect to things like NI training, basic LabVIEW training for new colleagues, because it's not the job of a validation engineer or me to train the people on LabVIEW or test them, because those are the tools we're using. We rely on NI on that. It's rather easy for us because we have an enterprise agreement, so with training credits included, so we can basically approach them and get the training. at any time we want that, if you have enough people for it. And next to that, we also make use of that self-paced online training. So there are quite some good resources to start at for a new employee to build up some knowledge. But that should not be, it should not stop there. It also requires some guidance in this sense. And
I think really important for the management side here is that you don't have to train your trainer. And one thing we always forget is keeping content updated, keeping training updated is also something we have to invest to. And so that's also something we sometimes forget, that is a huge investment to have proper training.
Absolutely. I think the moment you have completed a training course manual, it's outdated. Another great thing, I believe, is what was released really with this NIWeek is that badging program, because it's not to somehow, I don't know, push people to do that, but I think it's a great thing to engage people in self-driven learning and see what they can accomplish if they just do some practice on their own and trials with the badge program, going through its certification. So I can see those results immediately, and depending on my personality, I either feel motivated if I pass it, or if I fail, I'm feel motivated to learn more, or it maybe requires some guidance and some support.
So we have a really controversial discussion about that, if you feel demotivated if you don't pass the test. But I think as engineers we like to fail and then try again and find out what we are not knowing. So in general, I would say, in my opinion, that's just my one, we tend to like that too. And the tests are really cool. I don't know if you've tried it out. There's always that 1, 2, 3 questions that are a bit tricky. And so it's really fun to do these different badges.
And it can be a very good piece in the onboarding plan, too, as a milestone.
Well, the good thing for management, well, you get a new employee and not always is a trainer available, a training course available or something like that. And with the badges, the new employee can really self-train him. And you have at the end for him and also for you a proof point with the badge, with the assessment, that he has gained the knowledge. If he's not cheating, but at the end we should trust our employees here in that area. And another recommendation is it's still using existing infrastructure that's already there. So using recorded stuff. And you can really easily record presentations, talks, introduction of your technical topics. We did it in the German AE department 3 years ago, and that's now our best practice within our whole region, within the application engineering, system engineering department. So every of our engineers has a goal. When he dives into a new technology, he creates at the end a presentation, and he runs that presentation for the whole region. So it's normally a call where different people in different locations join in, and we use Skype for that, and in Skype you can record that session. And afterwards we have a portal. Behind the portal we have source code control, so all the slides are under source code control. That's very helpful. And there we save all that different sessions. And I mean that's more for long-term development of all people, but for the onboarding you can reuse some of that session where somebody already introduced a technical topic very well. And you can just put that into your onboarding plan and say, hey, watch these sessions during the first week because they will teach you some of the basic concepts. And the great thing is that this recording must not be perfect. Spend no time in cutting them down or putting the question at the end away, because normally the questions that are coming from the audience are the questions this person would ask as well. So this simple trick, just record the session, make a portal out of it, put it into and put them into your onboarding plan is a very good best practice. And for the employee, again,
I have kind of my own way of learning, so it's self-paced. I can work on my own pace. I don't have to go anywhere, I just have to put up my hand on my headphones. I can go back and forth anytime if I want. And I can do it when it fits my schedule. And that's kind of a very, very flexible way of learning.
And similar to the training courses as management, we don't have to spend an employee doing the whole training over and over again. He can just come back to the technical person, ask questions after he watched the recordings, And so that's it. So I can really save here, and again, I don't have to train trainers.
Yeah, so no, I think the next one is very important, but I let you first explain it.
The next one is something we are doing in our team. In our team, we are really a small team, just 7 people. So that's a good recommendation for really small teams. We have a team handbook. In that team handbook, we note down all of our processes, and new employees get always the tasks on one side to walk through them, but also their task is to review that handbook. And at the end, we have an updated version of all the different processes. I just want to give you one example in there. We have an imaging tool, and we use that imaging tool every time and I release a new update. I have to download that and then create all our hands-on images and stuff like that again. And yeah, that's a bit of an annoying job. It's not very popular within our team, so every time it's another member of our team. So I have to do the process something like twice every 2 years. But really after 2 years, I totally forgot how the process looked like. So I always go back into this handbook and there's written down what I should do in that case. And the great thing here is the new employee went through the whole process, updated everything, and so I have always the recent update of my whole processes. And I mean, for the new employee, again,
yeah, I can work on it on my own, but I also feel in a way valued because I can contribute with something very important, namely the way of updating the way of working document, which is kind of a living document which everyone can rely on. So therefore, this is something that has a great responsibility, or I have a great responsibility to it.
and again, for management, we have a good resource. We don't need always a trainer on that side, and we have always an updated version of all of our different processes.
Oh yeah, this one comes close to my heart. Mentoring. I think there Lorenz also has something to add afterwards because there is a training for mentoring. I just want to say a few things from my experience, and I guess I assume everyone maybe in this room has kind of taken over mentorship for someone else, just quickly. So wow, that's amazing. So you are more the experts than me because I'm not doing that for so long. But this is kind of a very nice way to help someone new to grow into the team, but it should not be to, how to say it, it should be only offering advice, like with that picture. It should not cut him down or cut her down to restrictions. So leave that kind of thing open. So helping with instructions at the low-level threshold to ask questions that you normally could not or would not ask to your manager. So it's a peer in that sense. I'm also was onboarded once, and I always go to my mentor if I have some questions that I found weird to ask my manager. It's kind of an opportunity for informal interaction, and also for the mentor. So what I experienced with those two guys is I learned more from them than they learned from me, I think, with respect to mentoring and also something to LabVIEW. So that was a great experience. And I think the most important stuff with mentorship is that you take it serious and that you really build up a relationship with those colleagues that you're mentoring.
And take the time to do that.
And
right?
taking the time to do that. And one thing that helps with that is if you try to set up regular one-on-ones, because then you don't have to squeeze them in. You can just once a week or once every other week meet and discuss questions. And
Darren, you have a comment?
Yeah, who should be the mentor? Should it be the manager, colleagues, different departments?
That's a very good question.
Brilliant question.
Who should be the mentor? And so for me, I'm lucky. My former mentor is now my manager. I would say, again, it depends a bit, but a colleague is always better. And yeah, let's jump to the management view. So if you have a peer who is mentoring, the management has to be technical. It can sometimes be that your manager is not a technical person. And again, that builds up a relationship. And we discussed that up front, that connection is really hard to get. a mentor can really help you to connect to other people. You can build a connection, friendship with your mentor. So I would say in general, it's better to have not in the management or not team lead be the mentor, but there are cases where it can be a mentor as well. So
what's your view, Darren?
I think it shouldn't be the manager,
Yeah.
because while you said earlier, if you have something you don't want to ask the manager about,
Yeah.
then obviously if your mentor is a manager, you kind of we're stuck.
Yeah.
So yeah, if there's someone who's on your level, if you like,
Yeah.
someone
On your
you
desk.
sit next to on your desk or in the same department.
Yeah, that's very good. Someone who should sit next to your desk. So a mentor should also be very well available. Should be not something that work on another country or something like that. It makes really sense that he's next to you. And you can, especially at the beginning, ask him on a very regular basis. One tip that was coming up in the session before: what if I'm the lone wolf? If I'm the lone wolf, my recommendation is go to an event like NIWeek, go to a local LabVIEW user group, make friendships with other people, and search for a mentor in that area. That worked also very well. Yeah.
So mentoring somebody else takes a lot of time.
Yes.
What do you find is the amount of time, percentage-wise, that a mentor needs to carve out of their schedule in order to devote to that task?
In terms of planning in that time for that person?
Yes.
Is that the question? Oh, that's a tough one.
I can somehow answer on that. So first of all, there's also training available for mentoring that helps bringing mentors up to speed, help them. As team lead, mentor your mentors. If you know you have mentors in your team, try to be the mentor for them as well. And then, so we have a good best practice. So I have a good best practice with my team lead. We met once a week for an hour. In that hour, we have also that kind of risk management. I'm giving an update, but I would say it's at least 20 minutes there is just he review me, give me feedback and things like that. And he prepped for that. I know that because he told me that. Something like a half hour before and half hour afterwards. And in addition to that, he got mentoring for the mentoring. And so what we do at NI, we have for team leaders roundtables where they met on a quarterly basis and share experience and best practices. So it's a lot, but I think it's really worth it.
And I have another view on that, because for us it's more informal, so it's not an official time that's planned in for a mentor. So it's left up to the mentor to invest time and be proactive with that. So
I mean, there's always this kind of proactive mentoring and reactive mentoring, and especially if you're doing reactive mentoring, or if you are in the phase that you are having a new employee, you will spend much more time on that, as maybe than later on.
Have you found that if you have a regular meeting, if your mentor or manager or whoever is busy, that's like the first thing to be cut? Because it's very easy.
Thank you very much. That's a very good point. So Darren stated out that if I got the feeling with the regular meeting that this is cut out if we have a lot of workload. No. So we have it really scheduled once a week. During travel, I think once a week is sometimes too much, especially if you're already a senior role. But we scheduled it once a week. So every time if he's traveling or if I'm traveling, that works. And for my mentor, it's really, if I have a question, I just ask him. So, and he's always reporting, he's always answering me. So I've never had the phase that my manager is telling me I have something with that is more important. I never run into that issue. But that's again skill of the team lead or the mentor, and I think as higher that skill is, as better it is. Right.
yeah, and I think from manager perspective, you also need to pick your mentor very wisely.
So one aspect to that, I went through a mentor training a few months ago.
Okay, yeah. that would be good to.
And there they stated out also, I mean, you can try to pick a mentor, but sometimes mentorship is also something that is self-developed, right? You got another person, a senior person, you get a connection to him and you like him, and then automatically he will get your mentor. And so sometimes it's really hard to assign a mentor. I mean, at the beginning it's easy, and then you build a relationship that might work. but you can't go to someone and say, I want mentor you.
That's also a good point. It's formal and informal mentoring.
Yeah.
Got a question. Maybe it's like layers, right? I mean, the first layer is training.
Yeah.
That takes actually a lot of time.
Yeah.
But the second layer is for somebody who's onboarding. And what's really important? I have so many processes. I have so many training, and so many situations. So how should I, as a new employee, act in every case? So that's, I think, where a mentor can add a value to say the way it should be done is this way because these are our values, this is the training you have to see. So it doesn't necessarily have to take a lot of time,
Yeah.
because it's more a pointing than a training or extension of training.
Thank you for that comment. So in mentoring, there are more layers of it. At the beginning, it's more like training, and then at the end, it's more like helping answer questions and stuff like that. And one maybe good tip to that we got from one of our very advanced team leader in the AE department. If you're a mentor and you recognized an issue, and with your team, what is the counterpart of a mentor person? I don't know. Is there a term for? I don't know.
Mentee.
Mentee? Okay. So if the mentee has an issue, then it's really important that he by himself should figure out what the issue is. So ask him, why did that went wrong? And it's sometimes annoying to ask a question over and over again, but really help him self-develop the solution to his issue. And also, if you have somehow the issue at the end, don't criticize him on everything. Try to focus on up to 3. At maximum 3 things he should develop further to solve the issue. And just 3 things because we just can handle more than 3 things at a time. If you are very advanced in something, and I know that from sword fighting, you can handle more than 3 things, but more than 3 things at the beginning is really hard to look at. Good. The next thing, and we are already super short on time, we learned is what is an interesting best practice is to have some kind of a simulated project at the beginning. Again, our LE department is doing something like that at the beginning. So the new employee got some kind of standard training, some kind of specific training. Then he should came up with his own idea he should implement. There are some requirements to that, should cover FPGA, stuff like that. Then he comes up with his own idea. That's something, sometimes this kind of floppy disk music kind of application. Then he got the hardware, the framework, and a technical mentor. Then he implement the whole project, and at the end he has to do documentation, presentations, stuff like these to learn a lot of skills very fast. It's a simulated project, but if you simulated it very well, he can take a lot of learnings from it. And it's a safe environment again, so he can do failures, and we learn from failures very well. So that's, I think, an interesting best practices that you can do. What's really important if you work with this kind of projects, you can do some kind of that simulated projects also during your projects. There was one quote or one comment from the CLA summit that someone says that students always on nice to have projects. And again, I liked your comment. It's very critical if you set someone on nice to have projects, as nice to have projects tend not to get the same support as real projects, and with that the student will not get the same lessons learned from it, and you should set new employees and students on projects where they can learn as much as possible.
A kind of hybrid between a real project and a nice to have project is kind of an innovation project, or a project that you intend to use then later in another project in your company, and let them do that portion to gain some experience. Oh yeah, that's from Rob, from Vallejo, basically, and also close to my heart. And Peter Horn did a lot of good presentations on code reviews. That's a very vague term. In the meantime, I figured out, hearing from today, what a review can also include. But this should be something also with respect to clarity within the team, that it is clear to someone that whatever source code he or she is developing is part of or needs to be part of a review process. Because with that having formalized, there is no kind of feeling observed or getting I don't know, cherry picked for making some development mistakes. It's kind of a process everyone has to go through, and that means also for that review it's important to define the scope when you do a review. So you're not always reviewing maybe everything, but you're defining a certain piece of that code you're going to review. And what is also important is those things should not get personal. They should be really kind of valuable feedback in sharing another view on how things could be maybe implemented or where things may have some issues. And of course, using existing tools to reduce that effort is also valuable.
And I think what's important there is maybe set the mentor on the reviewer role, because then it's really a trustworthy relationship, and the mentor can use that standard process very well to focus on different development areas, to push the new employee in a direction. But again, there all the best practices come in. So self-development, so the employee should then got forced in the direction, but he should self come up with solutions for his issues, things like that.
What I also think is makes sense there is that not the mentor is always reviewing the code of the let's say new employee. It's also going the other way around, so that the new employee gets the opportunity to review some code from the mentor, because then you can really try and build up a trusty relationship, because you also as a mentor are able to take feedback on implementations.
And just a very short tip, bookmarks are a great way to document your code review, to give the employee afterwards, or the person, jump right back to the different area where you gave feedback. So we use the bookmark manager heavily in redoing code reviews. Another thing that is similar to code review is some kind of personal review. We call that feedback. Feedback is also a cultural thing. We at NI are having a good and highly feedback culture. We have trainings for how to give feedback in the right way. I linked in just some kind of processes for that feedback there. But what I think is here again, the culture really important. If you are a person who can't take feedback at all, and these people should exist, I heard about that, then you don't fit to the culture, to the company. If you get hired into that company and all the time people giving you feedback, even if it's constructive, and you can't handle that, then you will be unmotivated, unhappy, and finally left the company. So in your hiring process, you should really carefully take things like that in consideration for your talks with the new potential.
It also depends how the feedback is viewed.
Yeah, that's really important.
It's just a view.
We assume, we assume that it's really well given. But yeah, so one example.
You have a good point there.
One example of very good feedback would be, for example, if you have someone with a lot of text on the slide, you go through and say, hey, in your presentation, in my opinion, I was somehow distracted during the presentation, and I would recommend to you to put in pictures and just the bullet points. I recommend to you read the 6x6 rule, and then at the end you will get your message better through to the employee, and you will be more successful in presenting your presentations. And that's really important to say. It's just your opinion, making recommendation, and really show him the results on both sides. So what was the results that make the thing not so successful, and what will be the result if he implemented the best practices. And that's stated out in this training here. You can go to the webpage, watch it if you're interested.
It's kind of like you ever heard of creating a safe environment. It's kind of related back to your badge example, right?
Yeah.
I had an employee that went out recently for the certification. I could have, and they didn't achieve it on the first try, right? Could have easily met that with, what was going on. We spent a lot of money on this, but it was met with, congratulations, awesome, thank you for going out, putting yourself back out there. What can we do to help you, And, so it does. I do feel like it's a lot on the company, not just the individual, of how well they take feedback, I guess, right?
And please also give positive feedback.
Yeah.
Because just if you get positive feedback, you know you did something well, you will do it again. Finally, what is very challenging in the onboarding phase if you onboarding already very experienced people.
So that is kind of a thing that is also very, I find it very difficult to onboard someone who is experienced rather than someone who is new, because someone who is new you can a little bit form and apply kind of really structured process all the time, because it's always similar, different but similar. But for a new or for someone who is experienced, that requires an adoption of that plan basically to their needs, so where the gaps are that need to be filled with respect to the requirements, to the development plan, and to the skill set that is required for the job. And therefore I think you can take a lot of things out from existing onboarding plans, from that structure, but you always also need to, in a way, customize that to the needs of that person.
So we are already running out of time, and we have so much more best practices that we already collected. And we want to get also all of your best practices, your ideas, your comments, what worked well, and hopefully also what worked not so well, because I think we can learn a lot from that as well, to all that different topics. So first of all, okay, just I really quickly walk through it. All of that is and will be part of the LabVIEW Center of Excellence program. There is a section for internal onboarding, and Nancy told us that she will add that session to that content as well. So overall, was that interesting for you? Yes? Yeah? Cool. Nice, thanks. That's very good. And we would like you to be contributing to that. So do you have already some kind of ideas here? Best practices, comments to our best practices?
Yeah.
You mentioned explicitly training for the technical side of things, right? Which I think I see on my company we do a lot, right? And we gravitate towards it very easily. But I also think it's really important to focus on some of the soft skill development, right? We have outsourced a lot of our leadership skill development, right, and things like that. I'd like to see across the industry as well, focusing on that and leadership models.
Due to time, we kicked out that slide, but the comment was very well. There's also training on soft skills and other things than just technical stuff. So there's project management training,
communication, emotional intelligence, presentation skills, all that stuff. Right?
All that stuff. So that's a really important comment. Yes. Thank you very much.
So I think for those who really want to contribute or have already an idea that what they would like to share with us, we would really appreciate that if you can just come after this session and share your business card with us, and then we would contact you in kind of a follow-up action.
Yeah, if you want to, we would love to interview you, collect your best practices, and if you want to, we can give you also feedback and ideas. We do that in our free time, so sorry if the response is not very quickly, but we try to do that and add all that best practices to the existing material. That is the next step. And with that said, we talked about the clarification, confidence, and connection. Just if you do them all together, they will work. So if you know what your role is, but you are not very confident that you can achieve your goals and stuff like that, you will be not successful. So just if you have all of them together, your onboarding will be really successful. And there is not the perfect onboarding plan, that's not existing, but I think there can be a very good one for your team. So please go out and create it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.